Hey guys, Math 3, going to go pretty quick on this. I forgot to do this earlier. What we're going to do here, we're going to look at what we call completing the square. So the first thing we do is we just run through these 8 examples. I'm just taking my time multiplying these out. We're doing some foiling in class. Eventually I quit actually foiling them out and we're able to figure out the pattern. Okay? Now, take your time. You don't have to go through these nearly as quick. Okay, but the whole point of all of that was we're just trying to see what happens when we multiply these this binomial squared, and we get that trinomial, and we try to figure out what it's called. And of course, these are called a special name. They're called perfect square trinomials. Now again, that's a super fast little review, but that is the name of all of these. So just kind of look and see what they all have in common. We are looking for a pattern, but it's not about the numbers, it's about the process. So we'll figure that out in a second. Looking at these 8 examples here and what makes a perfect square trinomial, look at these 4 down here and see if you can find ones that are perfect. And this one is a perfect square trinomial because if you look at it, you can write it like this. And just double check to make sure that makes sense. Check for another perfect square trinomial. First off, there's a typo here. Those should both be x's. And there's also a typo here. Those should both be x's. But if you make those both x's, then you can see that this one is a perfect square trinomial for the same reason. Okay? Now, here's where we really had to stretch in class. We looked at all 10 of these perfect square trinomials, and we were looking for the pattern. And we're looking for the pattern of what the middle term and the last term, how they're related to each other. And it took a while, a little teeth pulling, but we were able to figure out that in a perfect square trinomial, the last term is the square of half of the middle term. Now check these out. For example, let's look up here. The last term, 16, is the square of half of the middle term. So what I take half of 8 is 4, 4 squared is 16. It worked. I can come over here and try the same thing. Actually, let's do this one. Let's keep them positive. Half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4. Okay. Down here I can look. Half of 10 is 5, and 5 squared does give you 25. So that's where this came from, and that's the key to what we're doing next. Okay. The next thing is to figure out the value that's missing. Now I'm asking you 2 questions. What I want you to do is I want you to take this incomplete trinomial and I want you to find what would make it perfect at the end. So what I'm going to do is what I just mentioned at the top. I'm going to take half of the middle term and then I'm going to square it. Alright, so half of the middle term, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. So that one has to go there. Now, in addition to that, I also want you to write what that polynomial would be as a perfect square. And that looks like this. Okay, so I'm actually doing 2 things here. One is to complete the square, which is the first part in red. And then the second thing is to write the polynomial as a perfect square, which is what I did in blue. Try it again. Okay, I'm going to take half of 2 and then square it. Well, half of 2 is 1. And 1 squared is 1. So I write my answer out like that. Try it over here. Half of 16 and then square it. Half of negative 16 is negative 8. Negative 8 squared is positive 64. So that would look like this. And then over here, half of 20 squared is negative 10 and negative 10 squared. Now those were easier because all of those happen to be even numbers, and taking half of an even number is always nice. But down here I've got odd numbers and I've got fractions and decimals. So I'm going to do the same exact process. I'm not going to talk you through it, but I'm going to do the same exact process. I just want you to take your time and look at it. Now notice on this first one, I could write that out in a decimal or a fraction, but I hope you recognize that a fraction is probably a better way of doing it because it's easier to see the square. Again, take your time. Half of 9, and then square it. Over here, all right, I've got half of negative 4/5. Well, half of negative 4/5 is actually negative 2/5. Forgot the negative part there. And then when you do negative 2/5 times itself, you end up with positive 4/25. And then there's the last example. Guys, if you got any questions, just see me in class. I'll be glad to talk to you. If you flip that sheet over, there's some problems to practice with.